Welcome everyone, I'm Greg Schnell, the Canadian technician, here to host the Market Buzz. This show looks at weekly setups across the US market. Using the tools available on StockCharts, we'll look for long time frame trades. Please subscribe to my articles, my Twitter feed, and to gregschnell.com for more information. Thanks everybody for taking the time today. Lots going on in the market, but I am on vacation at this point when you're listening to this video. So today I'm going to cover off some of the tricks to getting your charts to show up a lot better and hopefully help you out with your chart development. So I want to cover off what overlays and indicators are today. So I'm going to work through those. So overlays, what are they? Where are the controls for overlays? Why are overlays helpful? How are overlays different? And then, of course, when to use them. And the real trick on when is you don't want to clutter your chart too much because otherwise you can't see the actual price action. So you want to use an overlay at specific times, but you need to decide which ones because you can't have too many. And then how to use overlays, so we're going to cover off that a little bit. And then for the second part, I'm going to cover off the indicators and what is the difference, how to use them, positioning them, how chart size affects indicators, changing the relative size of an indicator panel, and then the types of indicators that are available. So hopefully with all of that, we'll get you up to speed if you aren't already on different charting techniques, and maybe there's some hidden tips and tricks that I can show you today if you're an accomplished chartist already. So let's jump over onto Safari, and what I want to show you today. So in here is the overlays panel, and I'm going to shrink this chart up here to make it very small so that we can talk specifically to the overlays panel and see this at the same time. So I want to be able to see the chart and see the overlay. I'm going to remove the indicators for now, so I'm just going to say clear all. And here I've got some overlays on the chart, and in this particular case I'm going to turn off the full quote too, just so that'll give us a little more chart real estate. So one of the things that we need to be aware of is when we place an overlay on a chart, it actually physically goes in front of the data or on top of the data, whereas if I place an indicator, it's going to create a box below. And it's, now we can control that a little bit, but in general, overlays actually reside on the price chart and indicators reside under or above or behind, but they're considered to be different. They don't overlay the data. Okay, so that's the difference between the two. Now let's just take that off for now. And what I want to talk about is how to turn on these features. So one of the things in here, everybody's probably heard of Bollinger Bands, and you can always create the Bollinger Bands any way you want. So in this case, if I want solid, thick Bollinger Bands, or if I want area Bollinger Bands, I can put them on and I can make them any color I want. So in this case, let's just say they're green, and the opacity, I'm going to set them to be 0.6, and you'll see what happens here. So that overlays the data. And when it's sitting there, obviously it can be too dark or too light. So usually if I make it 1, again, the opacity is how translucent it is. And you can see if I make it 1, and because it's an overlay, it's actually covering the data. And if I make it 0.4, which is typically a nice setting that will show up on your screen, but yet you can see the data through it, that's helpful. So we want to use these overlays to help us, and the idea, I'm not going to get into explaining how to use a Bollinger Band and all that today. This is more about how to do the settings on here. So I want to help you focus on getting different overlays on your chart, and we have a few unique ones in here. So I'm going to turn off the Bollinger Bands, and I'm going to go and just take a horizontal line. And let's say in this particular case, price is hovering, whatever, it got up to $40, and we could just snap a line on there, or perhaps we want to use this $22.48 breakout level. Is all we do is we type in $22.48. We pick a color. Do we want it to be a solid line, a thin, and we'll go blue. And then it's going to zap that line across the chart at whatever price point we put. Now, as the data continues to the right as days and months go by, this line will stay in place. Okay, Ichimoku Cloud, I'm not going to get into it, but again, it overlays the data much like the Bollinger Band, and it just sits here, and if you're above it, that's bullish, and if you're below it, it's bearish. So I'm not going to cover that one off. I don't use the Ichimoku. Keltner channels are like Bollinger Bands, but they're actually set up to be based on the ATR, the average true range. And so they widen out based on the movement of the chart. And when they get narrow, like in this band in here, they were basically just tracking nicely. And then when you start to break below the center, and the center in this case is the 20-period moving average, so 20 weeks. But what you want to look for in Keltner channels, they can help you define your data. And I actually use the Keltner channel in this particular setting where I'll put a Keltner channel on a 60-minute chart and just have it moving up if I want to, or even on a daily. And so these green lines are my Keltner channels. And the only thing you can, when you set them close enough together, you can use them to be either above or below your Keltner channel. And if I just add more time to this, it might make that chart a little bit more obvious, or maybe even 1 year. On the indicator panels, to understand what all of these settings are, I would encourage you to go to StockCharts Chart School and just go into here, and then you're going to type in the name Keltner channels, and it's going to bring up all the articles for you. So everything that is in all of our settings at StockCharts are positioned there so that you can go in and look at that data at any point in time, or at the information behind how to set up that data. Okay, there's a couple of key tools in here. Let's just clear all of these. And one of the key tools that I think is important if you're a dividend investor is that you can have it you can put events on here. And when you put events on and just hit update, what you're going to see is any dividends or splits. Now, in the case of the Indu, it doesn't do that. If we went to CN Rail or something like that, what we're going to get is this vertical line. And what this means is on this particular day, they paid a dividend of this amount. And you can see it's roughly every 3 months. And then if the dividend level changes, that box is put in. The way the full quote box calculates the dividend is it takes this number and multiplies it by 4, or if it's a monthly dividend, it'll multiply it by 12. So it's not adding up the last 4 and saying here's what the going rate of dividends is. It's all based just on the last one and prorating it out. Okay, so that's how to get the dividends to show up. And if you said events all, you can also just ask for splits. So if there's a 2 for 1 or something like that. So whatever, we'll just leave it here, but I'll go show you Apple as an example. And we'll go to a 10-year chart, and then we're going to see that Apple did a split right in here, this big kind of wedge. And what that was a 7 for 1 split, where if you had 1 share, or 1 to 7, if you had 1 share, they gave you 7 shares instead to lower the price. So it's this will help you see splits, and if you have a really lousy stock, you'll see they do a 10 for 1 all the time or something like that, trying to get it back above the minimum price for the exchange they're trading on. Okay, some of the other options in here, just real quickly, parabolic SAR, chandelier exits. These are things that you can overlay on the chart to help you with exits and entries. Volume by price is an interesting one, and one of the reasons is it shows you where most of the price action for Apple was. It was down in this price area, and now we've had less and less action up at these highs because obviously we've never been here before. So as the price changes, you'll see this scale on the left will show up, and obviously these are up volumes and the red is down volumes. But what you also want to understand with this is you could put in a setting in here for volume by price, and whatever, I'm going to pick 25 just to be different, and that's going to make it 25 different lines of data in here. Now I'm on a weekly scale, I'm on 10 years and all that kind of stuff. Let's just clean up this chart and take it back to 3 years or something, and then the data is going to look much more normal. But what you can see here is the volume by price profile on the chart, and again, you can refine that. And because this is a logarithmic scale, that's why these are wider at the bottom and narrower at the top. Okay, working through, VWAP is only on intraday charts, so on a 5-minute chart. Zigzag, you can say I only want a zigzag to show up if it's been 7% or more, or 5% or some number, and then the retrace actually connects it and says line 1, line 2, line 3, line 4, and might help you with your Elliott wave calculating or whatever. Pivot points, all of this type of stuff is on here. Simple moving average envelopes. This one here is the exponential moving average envelopes, and then just simple moving average, exponential moving average, all the basic stuff. So these go right on top of the price, and I think you'll find them very helpful. Now, the second component that I want to talk about today is getting into the indicators. So let's go back and just look at that panel quickly. I just want to go, don't know if I can do that. Can I go to slide 2? Yeah. What I want to show here, what I want to show is, so when to use an overlay, it's when you want it to be on top of the price, not above or below. Where are the controls for overlays? Well, they're between chart attributes and above indicators. And why are overlays helpful? Well, you can use them to show support and resistance, like we did with that Keltner band, or you can, for Bollinger Bands, it could be you're at an extreme, either direction. And again, overlays cover the price or ride on the price, whereas indicators are calculated from price, but they're typically put above or below in a separate panel. And again, the way to use overlays, go to the chart school for finding out the settings on a Keltner channel or that type of thing. But the second component that you want to remember is whenever you're using them for events or stuff like that, you can ask for splits only, dividends only. All of that information is sitting over in chart school, and you can go there and get that. Okay, so let's jump on to the third panel here, and I'm just going to quickly speed this up, I hope. Maybe not. So we want to position indicators, and I want to show you specifically how chart size affects indicators, because that's an important thing. Changing the relative size of an indicator panel. Okay, now I want to talk about the height of the charts, and what I want to talk about here is I've set up my charts to be 750, and I mentioned it in the chart attributes video that I'm trying to control the height. Now what I want to do is, if I just pick the default chart style, what's going to happen is, see how the chart no longer fits on my page, and that's because the default chart style extends this out. And with the extension, if I keep adding indicators to the bottom, so in this particular case, let's just go look. So under custom, it would be at 950. Let's go back and just look at it under 900 and update. And then what I want to do is I want to add one more, or two more, whatever, it doesn't really matter which one, and this one, and this one. As I add these panels, it's going to extend the chart vertically and not shrink these panels, okay? Whereas if I set it at a custom height and I just pick, I want to say 750, it's going to squeeze all of these scales into there, and if I add another one, it's going to shrink them again and again and again. So the idea behind controlling the height of the panels is very important, and you have to understand which mode you're in, either in custom mode where you've restricted the height, or if you're in freeform mode where it will just keep adding them to the bottom. And then the second component I want to talk about here on the indicators, again, we're down, so you have chart attributes, you have overlays, and you have indicators. What we want to do when you're looking for something, you don't want 5 things that show the same. So as an example, if we have a MACD and we have a PPO and we have a PMO and we have Pring's KST, what you'll see is, and I think the trend strength indicator is the same, So you have all of these set up, and what you'll notice is the wiggles are roughly the same. And so the point I would say is you want to decide which one of these you want, and you don't want to put them all up here, because what would happen is if you're waiting for all 5 of these to confirm their signal, this one happened in early October or late October. This one is happening a little bit later. This one's got a signal earlier. This one's a little bit later. So they're all within a few days of each other, but they're still different. So are you waiting for that signal? And down in here, it could, it could be that you never get the signal all at the same time. So you want to be careful about selecting signals or indicators that give you the same data, because they're taking away from your screen real estate. So what I would suggest you do, and I'm just going to open this up a little wider. What I would suggest you do is look at the indicators and see if it tells you anything new. And if you don't like, just get one. And if, in my case, I like the PPO, and the reason I like the PPO is because I can compare it over time. So when I put that on here, I've now got this one waveform, and I typically like to use weekly. So on my weekly settings, I've got the PPO down here as one of my indicators. I have volume that shows separately. And a lot of times, if you're a person who buys breakouts all the time and you're only looking at charts up in the top right hand of the screen, it's okay to put the volume behind price. Okay, and so what you can do is you can set it up so it'll go behind. And now I've moved it from being its own indicator panel into the back here. But if you're a person who trades commodity stocks, and I'm just going to pick whatever, ECA or something, what you see here is you're down in the bottom, and sometimes your volume will overlap on top of your price, and that's not really that helpful. So then you want the volume to show up separately. The reason I've got it sitting down here is I want to put a 30-period moving average on this volume. So I have choices. I can put it above the price panel, I can put it below the price panel, I can put it behind the price, or I can actually put it behind the indicator. So in this case, it would put it behind the indicator that's listed right above on this form. So in here, I'm going to get this put in here, and you can see the volume is sitting inside this full stochastic. It's not very helpful for volume. What you can see on this same chart, though, is I have the scooter ranking up here in the top, and then if it goes in favor and out of favor, and that's helpful. But what you can also do is you might want to put on my default chart. Actually, I'll just scroll up here. On my default chart with for my daily, I have the relative strength in purple behind the SCTR. And if we just change ticker symbols here to Amazon or something like that, they move similar. But the big thing that you have to remember is the scooter ranking compares Amazon to how well it's performing compared to its peers. And in a way, that's what comparing it to the S&P 500 does. But if we want to compare, a stock like Shopify, and the reason I want to pick that one is the scooter ranking has been pinned at 99 forever, and it's not going to move. During this uptrend, you can see the scooter ranking stayed in the uptrend, and it continued to outperform all other stocks. So the scooter ranking actually gives you a percentage of how it's doing, and this uptrend, you might see this uptrend on a mortgage REIT that's barely outperforming, but they'll change the scale on the right hand side to be decimals, and it'll be very tiny. So what you want to watch for is when you overlay them, try and make sure that it's giving you a different picture or a different reason. And then if you want to separate them, so I have a button set up here that will automatically separate them for me and change the scale size so I can write an article. The point being, you can hide multiple pieces of information on one indicator panel, but the big trick is to make sure that you don't put the same data over and over and over. So on that first chart, it looked like of Amazon, it looked like the relative strength and the scooter ranking were about the same for Amazon. Well, you can see in Shopify, it's quite different, and we don't have this is pinned at the top and this is still rising all the way through. So I think it's important to think about what you want the data to show. So in my case, on a weekly chart, I want my PPO indicator to always be above 0 I want to see when it's pulling down and when it starts to turn up. That's important for me. I want to see the relative strength compared to its peers, and I want to see the relative strength compared to the S&P 500. And one of the things I find is when you can draw trend lines under your relative strength, when that trend line breaks, that's a better sell signal, because all of a sudden something that was outperforming has started to underperform. And when that happens, I probably don't want to own it. So looking here at the Shopify price action for all of 2018, it basically wiggled sideways and there wasn't much going on. It was still one of the better performing stocks because it stayed above 50%. But it just oscillated. In 2019, it went on an absolutely ballistic move from 150 to 400. And when that trend starts to end, that's a better sell signal. So if you waited until Shopify dropped out of the top 75 here, you went from 400 to 290, and you're just getting out now, so you've given up 25% of the gains. Whereas if you got out as it broke its relative strength trend compared to the S&P 500, you actually might have had way better timing and probably kept more of your profits. So try to make sure that they're telling you different things. And again, a full stochastic is a lot quicker. This signal down here on the 20 is moving higher, and it's a good signal. Now look, it stays positive for 2 years. That's pretty bullish and very easy to understand. In this particular case, it goes back and forth and back and forth and back and forth here. And when it's when it's rolling over below 50, it's telling you this is pretty weak. When you look at the PPO, it's still trending lower on the really big picture. So you might say, I don't want to get into this until it breaks that big trend. And when it finally did, it was a nice place to get on board. So use the indicators to help show you different things. Don't try to put 5 indicators on that tell you the same thing. That's probably my biggest trick there. Now, again, positioning above or below, when you move these, so let's move this price oscillator, and you can see right now it's on the bottom. When I click up, see this little blue box that moved up? It moved it up, and it happens so fast sometimes you don't think anything's going on. But those blue boxes are actually moving up, and I've said this word below, but I need to change it to above, because otherwise StockCharts will automatically move all the aboves to be above and then all the belows to be below. So I've done this. I've moved it up, and now all of a sudden my PPO is at the very top of the panel. Hopefully that made sense. So this reorder is the way you do that. And then on these different charts, some of them will have different ways to display the data. And the one thing that I would encourage you to look at is try the ones and find out the ones that work for you. So histogram is one way. Invisible might be that you actually don't want the data because it whips back and forth too much like the full stochastic. But what you want to know is just the current reading. And so with that, you might make the data invisible, but yet it'll give you an actual reading amount on the legend and tell you what it's showing. So sometimes I'll put the ATR on a chart, but I might not actually want to know, I might not want to see the ATR, the average true range line. I just want to know the actual value. Okay, over here so we talked about height and how to set that. Color is pretty obvious. Opacity, again, changing this is just how see-through it is. Overlays, so this is an overlay on an indicator, whereas this overlay up here is an overlay on your price panel. Okay, so this is where you put moving averages on prices. What if I want to put a moving average on my RSI? So as an example, or a horizontal line. So here is RSI, and what we want to do here is we want to put a simple moving average of 9 periods or something, and maybe that's a signal line for us. And so we'll put that on here, and when our RSI is below my signal line, and if you want to change the color of the signal line just to differentiate it, so we could go red, you use colon and spell out the word, and now that's going to make the signal line red, and your regular price data, you would control that, or your regular display, you would control that over here. So we could say it's blue or whatever, just to be just to make these setups. So you have full control of those, but the big thing that, again, I think you want to keep your data as clean as possible, so try not to do too many overlays. What I've done with my SCTR ranking here is I put a line up here at 75, and the idea behind that is when stocks are performing well and they're performing better than 75% of the stocks out there, they've got momentum, and that momentum might help them outperform. So it's good to keep track of that. So I like to put a horizontal line at 75. If you have stocks like commodities and you want to know when they're finally starting to come out of their lows and start to accelerate, you want to buy them near the lows. So you might use a different line for that type of investing. Okay, all of that adds up to be quite a bit of data, but the big thing that I would encourage you to do is try to get different indicators that will help you find what you like. So if it's advanced decline line or whatever, you can put it on there. But once you start to get too many of these indicators, they all get squished down. And so I would encourage you to, think about maybe 2 or 3 indicators at the most, because you also don't want to get to a point where you have indecision, where you've got so much data and you're waiting for them all to turn up. By the time they've all turned up, prices moved up 7% or 8%. And if you're looking for 20% moves or whatever, you've given up half just waiting for the signal. So if you're a full stochastic trader and it starts to turn up, that's great. But you probably, as you can see, there's a bunch of false signals all in here. How do you know if they're false or not? Well, maybe you're waiting for the PPO signal to start actually trending higher again, and you want to catch it on a higher low instead of a lower low. So maybe over here you want to catch this particular inflection point, not when they're still trending down. All depends on how you want to do it. But I would encourage you to use different ones and use them with each other. Okay, so I've shown you how to put an overlay on an indicator. I've shown you how to reposition indicators. The one thing I haven't shown you is how to put the price or the value of the indicator behind price. And so let's just select that option. So now this full stochastic is going to take center stage here, and you can see how it's swinging wildly right behind the price. You may like that, you may hate that, it's whatever you want. But the goal of StockCharts is allow you to place the data where you want it, and then just be careful, because again, the more clutter you put behind your price, the more difficult it's going to be. Lastly, if you want to compare the price of 2 stocks to each other, you can use a price box, and that's going to make an indicator panel below. And I've got an example here, I think with Amazon, where I have 7 stocks all listed here. And the way to do that is to put them all as price, and then list them, and then they'll show up as an indicator panel below. The other choice of that option would be to set it as performance. So I want to go get price, performance, and then I can do, it's going to change the scale from the actual value to whatever. So in this case, the chart is for Apple. Let's say I want to compare it to Microsoft, whatever. I can do a percentage chart of Microsoft, and you can see the scale over here on the right-hand side. From the beginning of this chart, this has moved up 50%. Apple, I've still got it on its own scale of price. So if I wanted to, I could work my way down here, and I could select the option here for performance for Apple. And then what would happen is when I do that, it's going to change the scale to percentage. So again, play with these options. You can't hurt anything. You just go through and look and see what's there. But the big point I want to make is that with these tools, you can set up the charts any way you like, as long as you know where to look for the data. Thanks for taking the time to join me. Have a good week, good trading, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.